Superheroes beating up on supervillains is a tradition literally as old as comics themselves. But sometimes things can go a bit far, even when the target is a supervillain. Beating them senseless and leaving them for the police is all well and good, but a real hero should make sure that they can at least sign their name or form coherent sentences once they've done so. Even so, there are just as many times when a superhero can't take it anymore, and so must bring the hammer down hard, both figuratively and very literally. And it's those moments, the ones that make you wince, shield your eyes, or just recoil in horror, that we're here to talk about today. As I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most brutal villain beatdowns in all of comics. Number 10. SpiderMan vs. Kingpin. There are many words to describe One More Day. Stupid, nonsensical, horribly written, contrived, just to name a few. But one scene in particular stands out as being one of the few actually bright spots in an otherwise god-awful storyline. Namely, the time Spider-Man absolutely takes the Kingpin apart. Now, to be honest, considering the kinds of feats Spidey pulls off on a regular basis, it shouldn't surprise us when Peter comes into Savage Fisk and old Butterball can barely land a single punch. Spidey usually holds himself back so much so as not to kill anyone he fights, that he's allowed Fisk to beat him senseless time and again. But with Aunt May's life on the line, and Wilson being the one behind it, Peter suddenly has little sympathy for the crime boss, and cuts him down to size instantaneously. And in front of all his cronies who are locked up there with him, just to add insult to injury. As heinous as the rest of this story might be, and good god, it is freaking heinous. It was nice to see Spidey make it clear to the so-called Kingpin of crime that if you step on this spider's web, you can expect to be eaten alive. Number 9. Black Panther and Storm versus the Skrulls. While most superheroes try to avoid killing whenever possible, Black Panther, for the most part, cannot afford to take such risks. Being the king of a highly advanced nation that a lot of invading alien forces know needs to go first if they want to take the Earth, T'Challa needs to make it clear that this is his kingdom. And if you mean it harm, he will make the 9th circle of hell look like a theme park. A lesson thoroughly taught to the Skrulls when they tried to take over the planet for the billionth time, starting with Wakanda. At first, T'Challa and his then wife Storm seemingly surrendered without a fuss. But this being T'Challa and Storm, it was of course part of a long con gambit to get rid of the Skrulls in one fell swoop. After tricking the Skrulls into torturing their own men for information, the alien invaders send out their best warriors to hunt the king and queen down. And the minute the toughest warriors in their army are gone, an army of Wakandan soldiers bust in and kill everyone on the ship, leaving none alive. Meanwhile, the remains of the Skrull warriors sent after Black Panther was barely enough to fill a shoebox. After killing all of the Skrulls who invaded his land, T'Challa used their blood to write a simple message on their bridge. This is what happens when you invade Wakanda. Number 8. Billy Butcher vs. Payback. If you want brutality to the point of absurdity, then you go to a Garth Ennis comic. While his work can be hit or miss at times, when a bad guy deserves to be brutalized, no one is better at coming up with the perfect method of delivering the punishment. This is the guy who wrote Preacher, after all. And nowhere is this better displayed than in the original The Boys comic, particularly issue 32, when Billy Butcher goes head-to-head with the Boys parody of the Avengers, Payback. Having helped the rest of the Boys escape, it's just Billy and his dog Terror against the most powerful supers in the world. But as Billy makes clear almost immediately, he's not trapped in an abandoned hospital with insanely powerful psychotic superpowered fascists, they're trapped in there with him. From strangling the Crimson Countess, to blinding Stormfront with a glass bottle, to impaling Swatto's skull with a pickaxe. We don't see the entirety of what the Butcher does to his enemies, but we see just enough to know that there won't be any survivors. Number 7. Daredevil vs. Bullseye. Daredevil and Bullseye have gone head-to-head multiple times, after Frank Miller brought him back as a major threat back in the 80s. But nowhere did the Master Assassin and the Man Without Fear's rivalry blaze hotter than during Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Malee's run on the character. Daredevil has endured a lot from Bullseye over the years, but when the psychotic killer breaks into his home to murder his then-girlfriend, Daredevil finally loses it. Bullseye has already taken one woman he loved away from him, and he isn't keen on repeating that. The fight, like most Daredevil fights, is brutal and gritty, but eventually Matt gets the upper hand and just lays into Bullseye. This isn't just Daredevil holding him down and beating him within an inch of his life, though make no mistake, that definitely does happen, but it's also Daredevil verbally assaulting him. As he beats him, he tells Bullseye that no one cares about him, that his mother never cared, his father never cared, and even he doesn't care about him. The only reason he doesn't kill Bullseye, he tells him, is because he just isn't worth the effort. It's a savage display that makes you actually feel sorry for one of Marvel's most depraved baddies. Number 6. Luke Cage vs. the Purple Man. If there is any supervillain who deserves to be beaten into a bloody, disgusting pulp, it's Zebediah Killgrave, the Purple Man. and how sweet it is to watch when Luke Cage comes in to deliver that beating. During a massive breakout that the new Avengers were trying to quell, Kilgrave had escaped and come face to face with Luke. Seeing as how this was the man who mentally, physically, and sexually abused his wife for over a year, Luke is practically giddy to have him all to himself. Kilgrave seemingly gets the upper hand when he orders him to go kill the Avengers, and then himself, until he realizes that he'd been drugged in jail, leaving him powerless. Then Luke Cage tears him apart. It's easily one of the most brutal beatings in all of comics, as Luke doesn't let up for a moment. By the time Captain America manages to stop him from killing the Purple Man, Kilgrave lightly wishes he had finished the job, as his face now resembled a burst grape. Number 5. X-23 vs Xander Rice. Saying that X-23 has authority issues is a bit of an understatement, but then you'd be messed up too if you went through the Weapon X program. For those younger watchers among us who love X-23's current adventures, it must be jarring, to say the least, to go back to her 2005 series or earlier appearances, because the difference in her attitude and emotional well-being is like night and day. And nowhere is this more evident than when she goes up against Dr. Xander Rice in X-23 issue 6. Xander Rice was the lead scientist on the project that gave Laura Kinney her powers, so needless to say they have a bit of unfinished business. With Rice's base minutes away from exploding, Laura is forced to choose between running away or using the time left to make sure Rice dies today. But when Rice shoots her in the back, the choice is made for her. Laura doesn't even use her claws, sheathing them to make sure that the last 11 minutes of Xander's life feel as long as possible. Xander spent so long taking out his anger at Wolverine on Laura, and all of that comes back to haunt him. Number 4. Daredevil vs Kingpin. If you thought that Daredevil savaging Bullseye was him at his lowest, you must be new to the world of Matt Murdock. Not even this entry is him at his absolute lowest, not for lack of trying. The Kingpin is probably the only person that has earned a beating from Matt more than Bullseye, as anyone who has read the excellent Daredevil Born Again can tell you. So it only makes sense that there would come a point where the guy can't take it anymore, and completely breaks under the pressure. Since this is comic books, that break comes in the form of Daredevil absolutely savaging Wilson Fisk in front of all his goons. While Fisk is able to put up a much better fight than he did against SpiderMan in One More Day, Daredevil takes everything Kingpin dishes out and gives twice as much back. And at the end, there's nothing but a beaten, broken shell of a man once known as Wilson Fisk. To prove how bad this was for him, Daredevil proceeds to take over all of the Kingpin's operations, realizing that if he can't stop the crime in Hell's Kitchen, he might as well control it. He puts the fear of God into every criminal present and tells them to leave if they must continue their wrongdoing. An all-new character low for Matt Murdock, but at least we finally got to see the Kingpin brought just as low in the process. Number 3. Harley vs the Joker. A big deciding factor of who goes where on this list is how anticipated the beatdown is. And boy howdy, has the comic reading public been waiting for Harley to give the Joker the business end of her mallet ever since she first appeared. When Harley falls for and starts dating an actually somewhat stable guy, comparatively speaking, named Mason, she decides to spring him from prison after he gets busted. Unfortunately, who should be there but the Joker, ready to put his hooks right back into Harley. But spoiler alert, it doesn't work out for him, at all. Harley mocks him for thinking his mind games would actually work, telling him that she has completely broken his hold on her, and then beats him within an inch of his miserable, misbegotten life. And she even complains that she's doing that much, because their relationship has been defined by pain, so she feels like she's undoing a lot of the progress she's made by giving in to her violent instincts when she came here with the intent of rescuing someone she actually cares for. She ends the beating by saying that she's done with him, done with all of it, and goes to find Mason. Tragic, beautiful, brutal, and human. Words that perfectly describe both Quinn and this scene in particular. Number 2. Spider-Man vs the Green Goblin. There are a few moments in Spider-Man's history that everyone agrees are true blue classics, but right there at the very tippy top is the night Gwen Stacy died. Obviously, such an act of murder and such a personal assault on Peter must be met with reprisal, right? Oh, you better believe it. Before the Green Goblin can set into motion his Machiavellian mission to kill everybody else that Spider-Man loves, the Webhead interrupts his plans before they can even begin, attacking Osborn with everything he's got. Then the Green Goblin finds a way to make his situation somehow even worse by insulting Spidey's dead girlfriend and how he had failed to save her. Needless to say, after that decision, Osborn doesn't last long. Spider-Man lays into the Goblin, screaming at him for taking away the woman he loved. How his life was finally getting back on track before he destroyed any chance of that happening again. Peter is only just barely able to stop himself from killing Osborn, realizing that killing the man would be letting him win. But Norman makes the decision for him, trying to impale Spidey with his Goblin glider. And well, you all know how that turned out. Number 1. Batman vs the Joker. There are villain beatdowns on this list that are more brutal. In fact, if we were judging purely by the gore on display, the boys would win out easily. But none of them are as visceral and as frightening in their brutality as when Batman very nearly killed the Joker. Most Batman fans know the story of Hush front to back, but let's give a refresher for those who weren't reading comics in the mid-2000s. Batman's best buddy, Tommy Elliot, is back in Gotham, and not 2 minutes after he gets back does the Joker shoot and seemingly kill him, an event likely known in Gotham as a welcome party. This makes Bruce Wayne angry. Very angry. He suits up and hunts the Joker down. Joker barely even gets a word in before Batman proceeds to tear the clown apart. And it's only by Commissioner Gordon stepping in that Batman realizes what he's doing and manages to stop himself from breaking his one rule. It was the first time in a long time that readers genuinely thought that this was going to be the day Batman killed the Joker. How could it not be the most savage villain beatdown in comics history? So there we have it, friends and foes, the 10 most brutal villain beatdowns in all of comics. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments below if you did. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter @PanelsToPixels, subscribe to What Culture Comics, and we'll see you next time.